Welcome to the Aligned Ambition podcast. I'm your host, Pooja Venkatraman. I'm a double Harvard grad, former BCG consultant, and now an executive coach for high achievers. On this podcast, we are going to tackle the 4 key things that you need to figure out in order to live a life of aligned ambition. Those 4 things are stress, productivity, performance, and purpose. We are going to make sure that you're driving your car in the direction that you actually want to go. That is the purpose part. We're also going to make sure that your progress along the road is consistent and effective. That's the productivity and performance part. And we're going to make sure that the fuel you're pouring into your tank isn't so noxious that it's filling your car with fumes and making the whole ride miserable. That is the stress part. Because if you can tackle those 4 things, stress, productivity, performance, and purpose, you can build the life and the career that you actually want. Not the life you think you're supposed to have, not the life that burns you out or doesn't fit quite right, but the life you actually want. One that fulfills your biggest ambitions and unleashes your fullest potential without sacrificing your sanity, your relationships, your authenticity, or your paycheck. A life that feels as good on the inside as it looks on the outside. That's what aligned ambition is all about. Let's get started. Hey guys, today we are continuing our 5-part series, 5 key career mistakes high achievers make. So if you are a high achiever in a high stress, highly coveted job that you worked really hard to get, you strategized, you thought hard, you aimed to get here, you got here very deliberately, but something about this job is just not working for you anymore, to the point that you are seriously thinking about leaving, but also you're not 100% sure exactly what you'd want to do next. And that is keeping you stuck in this limbo where you're pretty sure you don't want to be here anymore, or at least that something has to change, but you don't exactly know what that change is and what you should do next. So if you're stuck in that place, you are probably making one of these 5 mistakes, and it's keeping you confused and going around in circles about what to do next in your career. So in the last 2 podcast episodes, we talked about mistakes number 1 and 2. Mistake number 1 was not being clear on what you want and not owning it and making it your North Star. Mistake number 2 was having the subconscious goal of trying to arrive or trying to make it with your next career step and why that doesn't actually work. And today we're going to talk about mistake number 3, which is focusing on your weaknesses instead of investing in your strengths. Basically, this is having a weakness-based strategy for what you want to do next instead of a strengths-based strategy for what you want to do next. So here's what it sounds like when you're doing this. This could be someone saying, I want to pivot from finance to product management, but I feel like I'm only saying that because I'm bad at investing and I'm intimidated by all the pushback and conflict in my team culture. So I need to get better at investing and I need to get better at handling pushback before I'm allowed to pivot to product management. Or it could be someone who says, I'm in this customer-facing role and it's really high stress, it's really chaotic, I'm constantly getting interrupted, there's always fires to be putting out. And honestly, I'd rather be in a higher level role that's more strategic and predictable and isn't just full of fires all the time. But I have to get better at firefighting and juggling a lot of balls at once and dealing with chaos before I can go to that other role. Or it might be someone who says, well, the leadership just changed recently in my role. And suddenly I'm spending like 90% of my time playing politics and way less time actually just like doing the work and trying to like hit the metrics that we're trying to hit. And I would really like to do something where I'm playing less politics and more to spending more time just doing the work. But I feel like I'm just saying that because I'm bad at this. And so I have to get better at this. I have to get more comfortable playing the politics before I'm allowed to move on, right? So what's happening here when people have these kinds of reasonings, right? Is one of the reasons that you probably feel like something's not working in your current job, something has to change, it might be time to move on. Probably one of the reasons you're feeling that way is that the work you're doing right now doesn't play to your strengths. And because it doesn't play to your strengths, you feel like you're bad at it. And you might actually be bad at it. And in the context of high achievers, being bad at it means you're getting like a B or a B plus instead of getting an A plus, right? You're just not in the top 0.15, 0.005 percentile of doing this thing. So you might feel like you're doing badly. You might objectively also see that your performance is not A plus performance. And here's the thing with high achievers. When you feel like you're bad at something and you see that your performance is not an A plus, you want to double down. And you want to get better at that thing. You don't want to walk away from something just because it's hard. You don't want to be lazy or weak or entitled or whiny. And you also don't want to miss out on a critical skill that you might need in the future. You want to be well-rounded, well-equipped, ready to be more senior in your career. Unfortunately, this then means that you're stuck, because your logic is basically, I want to leave because I feel like I'm bad at this and I'm not really enjoying it, but I have to stay because I feel like I'm bad at this and I'm not really enjoying it, right? You are now stuck between a rock and a hard place. You have framed up a lose-lose situation with two bad options, right? It's basically like, if you leave, you're lazy, and if you stay, you have to stay and struggle. So here's your way out of this lose-lose situation, because I actually think this is not the right way to think about what's in front of you. And there are three misconceptions that a lot of high achievers have that create this lose-lose framing. And if you clear up those three misconceptions, you can get out of the lose-lose and you can develop a strengths-based strategy for your next career step instead of a weakness-based strategy for your next step, right? And even just framing it that way, calling it a weakness-based strategy, makes it pretty obvious you probably don't want to do that, right? I would not recommend developing a weakness-based strategy for your next step. So let's talk about the three misconceptions that are inadvertently making you develop a weakness-based strategy, and how if you clear them up, you can develop a strengths-based strategy, which is going to work a lot better for you. So misconception number one is, it's important to be well-rounded. It's important to have all of the skills at an A+ level of proficiency. Now, it is true that in earlier levels of your career, especially when you're starting out, it is important to get to a basic level of proficiency in a lot of different skills, right? In your first 3 to 5 years of your career, you're going to be working on, okay, I need to get good at analysis and communication and managing people and managing up and handling conflict and juggling lots of priorities. There's a whole suite of skills based on what field you're in that you're going to want to become well-rounded, which just means you get to a basic level of proficiency in all those skills. Once you hit basic on that toolkit, once you cross that threshold, you now have to change your strategy. You have to pivot from, I'm rounding out my toolkit and I'm just trying to get to basic, good level of proficiency at all these different skills. You have to shift to, I am now investing in my spikes, in my strengths, in my superpowers, right? You could think about the difference between a high school student who's getting a general education in a lot of different topics versus a college student who declares a major and they say, great, now it's biology or sociology or English like it was for me, right? And now I'm going to focus my attention on one particular subject, right? And I'm still going to learn a little bit about the other subjects, but I'm going to spend 60 to 80% of my time really investing in my one subject that I've chosen. And if you go to college and you don't pick a major, and you try to just keep being well-rounded, right, in all these different fields in a college setting, first off, you're going to stress yourself out because you can't get to a major level of expertise in every single field, in all 15, 20 fields that your college has, and you're going to be beat. You're going to be beat by the people who actually declared a major and who focused on one particular thing or two particular things and really made deep investments in those areas and made lower level investments in other areas. So just even thinking about the high school versus college analogy, you have graduated high school, right? You've gotten to the basic level of proficiency in a lot of different things, and now it's time for you to declare your major and invest in your spikes. Now, there's a second part of this misconception that kind of stops people. They think, well, to be more senior in my career, I'm going to have to be good at everything, right? This thing that I'm not as good at, like whether it's playing politics or juggling a lot of chaos and fighting a lot of fires or being really good at analysis or influencing people or motivating people, whatever it might be, people think, well, I've got to be good at all of those things in order to advance and be senior in my career. And it's interesting, I did a 3-part series with the HBS Women's Association last month, where I did it with another coach, Megan Porter. She coaches first-time C-suite leaders. And we did a whole event series about how to choose, get hired for, and succeed in a C-suite role. If you're interested in that series, by the way, just shoot me an email and I'm happy to send it over to you. So we talked about what does it take to succeed in a C-suite role. And one of the main points that we really tried to nail for people is you don't get hired in a C-suite role for being well-rounded. You get hired for your spikes, for your strengths, for your superpowers. And you get hired based on what specific spikes and strengths are needed to solve the particular problem that you are being hired to solve or to hit the particular metrics you're being hired to hit, right? So you're not being hired for being well-rounded, for being able to do 15, 20, 30 things all really well. You're being hired for doing able to do them all well or doing them all like a little bit above average. You're being hired for being able to do a small handful of things like really well, like unusually superpower level of well. That's what's actually required to succeed and get more senior in your career. It's not about you being more and more well-rounded. It's about you really understanding these are my spikes, these are my strengths, these are my superpowers. I'm going to invest to make them even bigger and sharper and stronger. And then I'm going to position myself in places where those strengths and those spikes unlock a lot of value for somebody else. I'll give you a nice visual that I saw recently. I was doing a Clifton Strengths certification, which was really fun. And at the end of our training, the person who was leading it drew this visual on Zoom, and it really stuck with me. She drew a 5-pointed star, right? So you're going to have to imagine it. I'm not going to give you the visual. But she drew like a 5-pointed star, right? And she was basically like the points of this star, they are your strengths, they're your spikes, right? And then she was like the divots, right? Like the indents on the star, those are your non-strengths, right? Those are the things you're not as strong on. And she was like, so many people focus on those indents, right? They focus on the divots, the inside parts of the stars, and they try to push them out. And they're like trying to turn this star into a circle. They're trying to become well-rounded. And she was like, I just don't think that's a good strategy. It's not a high ROI strategy. You can pour so much time and effort and investment into trying to make those indents into a circle, and you may not even get that far. And she was like, the much better investment is to invest in your spikes, in your strengths, in all the pointy parts of the star. She was like, make those bigger and bigger and bigger. That's a much higher ROI investment. You're going to get way farther for your time and your effort by investing in your strengths. And so you can imagine the star, the whole 5-point star, getting bigger and bigger as you invest in those, in your strengths, right? And in your spikes. And then you just need to position that star in places where those spikes, those particular strengths unlock a lot of value for someone else. And then you can position yourself in places where the indents either just don't even matter that much for the problem that you're solving, or of course, you're probably going to be working on a team, right? And you can find other people where their spikes, right, their strengths fit in with the indents on your star, right? So the point of their star fits in the indent of your star, and you guys make a stronger team together. But in order to even do that, you need to invest in your spikes and your strengths. So if you clear up this misconception, right, this idea of like, I need to be well-rounded, and you shift it over to, oh, I actually need to invest in my strengths and invest in my spikes, that gets you out of that lose-lose situation of like, I want to leave because I feel like I'm bad at this, but I have to stay because I feel like I'm bad at this. You don't have to be well-rounded. You don't have to work on every single skill that pops up in front of you just because you feel like you're not good at it. Instead, you have to have a clear understanding of what are my strengths and how can I invest in them and make them even stronger and even sharper. And then you can look at the skills that are in front of you, right, and the improvements you would have to make to succeed here. And you can really say, okay, is staying here helping me invest in my strengths? And if it's not, where can I go that will help me invest in my strengths? But it cuts through that noise and it cuts through that lose-lose situation. Misconception number 2 that keeps people trapped in the lose-lose, right? Of like, I want to leave because I'm bad at this, but I have to stay because I'm bad at this. Misconception number 2 is being unaware of or discounting your strengths. Most high achievers have the most unbelievable, crystal clear awareness of their weaknesses and their areas of development. Right? If you imagine someone's like year-end review, you can imagine the like weaknesses and areas of development section, and it's like 10 pages of single-spaced typing, right? There's so much like detail, precision, familiarity, examples, mechanics. This is why this weakness is this way. This is how it shows up for me. This is the logic that's happening that makes the bad result happen, right? People have so much detailed awareness of their weaknesses. And then if you imagine that same year-end review, if you flip the page over to the strengths and what you're doing well, for most high achievers, that's like 2 sentences. And it's just like, oh, like I'm good at like presenting and analysis. I'm good at managing and having influence. It's so vague. It's so broad, right? You barely have any awareness and depth of understanding and precision, familiarity, examples, mechanics on the strengths side of the equation. And imagine if you knew that your strengths just as well as you knew your weaknesses. Imagine if you had a 10-page single-spaced type report, right, of how with detailed understanding of your strengths that was just as robust and mechanical and full of examples and analytical as your understanding of your weaknesses. Most people don't have this, right? Most people don't have a deep, clear, objective, mechanical understanding of their own strengths. And if you don't have that clear understanding, it is impossible or very, very difficult to invest in your strengths and to build a strategy around your strengths because you don't even know what they are. You're like, my strength is communication. Right? Or my strength is analysis. And you're like, how are you supposed to build a strategy around that? That's too vague. That's too broad. The other thing I see people do is even if they have some level of awareness of their strengths, they discount their strengths. They say things like, well, everyone's good at that. That's not really that hard. That's not like a thing. That's just basics. That's just baseline. That's table stakes. That's not something that you would build a strategy around, right? And again, you can't invest in and build a strategy around your strengths if you discount them. And if you say they're basic, they're non-remarkable, everyone can do it. The truth is not everyone can do it. Not everyone does do it. They're not basic. They're absolutely a thing. And the fact that your strengths come so easily and naturally to you, the fact that they don't feel like a thing is your competitive advantage, right? That's actually what makes you so powerful is you're not even exerting that much effort to do these things and you're doing them in a like supernaturally, like superpower good kind of way, right? That is the competitive advantage. It feels like the reason that it's not a thing, but it's actually the reason it is a thing. That's your competitive advantage is that it comes so easily and so naturally to you. So I want you to imagine like a compare contrast, right? Imagine if you were building a strategy for a product. For example, I got an Aura ring recently. I'm showing it to you in the video if you're watching. And so we're going to use the Aura ring as an example. If you were the product manager, right, or the GM of the Aura ring, and you had to build a strategy for this ring, for this product, you would deeply understand its strengths. You would be like, oh, this product is on your finger. And so it's not going to bother you when you're typing by like, smashing against the desk while you're typing, right? That's one of the strengths of this product. Also, it has no screen. So it's not going to distract you. It's not going to buzz. It's not going to show you text messages. It's not going to show you push notifications. It's like a completely distraction-free tracker. Also, another one of its strengths is it tracks so much data, like an unbelievable number of metrics that are being tracked by this thing. And then I'd say another strength is the app. If you have to, you do need to get the app to see all the insights from the data. The app does a really good job of creating these aggregate scores so that you're not lost in all the million little data points that are being tracked. It'll give you things like, here's your readiness score, right? Like this is how ready you are for the day. It just like makes that aggregate score based on a lot of different metrics. It also does something called symptom radar so that if you're like starting to get sick or something's up with you, it'll let you know like, hey, we're seeing some signs, right? So it does these aggregate scores to help you make sense of all that data. So those are some of the strengths, right, of the Aura ring. And if you were the product strategist for it, you would just be like, yeah, we need to deeply, clearly, objectively understand what the strengths are. We can't just be like, it's pretty, right? Going back to that end of year review example, you can't just be like shiny, small. That would be a very bad starting point for building your product strategy for the Aura ring, right? You would need a detailed, thorough, clear understanding of the strengths of the product. And of course, you would want to have some level of understanding of the weaknesses as well, but you would understand your weaknesses just so that you can position the product in a way that either neutralizes the weakness or minimizes the weakness, right? So you could say, hey, it's a weakness of this product that you can't check your text on it, right? But what you would probably do as the product strategist to say, I'm going to target the people who don't want to check, who don't want another device, who don't want another thing that's like distracting them and buzzing on them and like giving them another screen to look at. I'm going to target the people who are like, I love that this doesn't have a screen. I'll give you another weakness for the Aura ring, right? Because it's not a wristband. You have to get your sizing accurately before you can order the product, right? Because the ring sizing is pretty precise. And if you get the wrong size, either not going to fit on your finger or it's going to fall off. That you could say that that's a genuine weakness, right? That makes it harder to purchase the Aura ring than like a Whoop or like an Apple Watch or any of those things, because those are all one size fits all. Right? So then you would still want to think about, how do I minimize that weakness? One of the things Aura does is they will send you a free sizing kit. You actually have to, I think you have to place the order for the ring, and then they'll send you the sizing kit. You can try on the rings, keep it as long, the sizing kit is yours. And then once you know your size, you go in and you order, you order the actual ring that you want. And then they also tell you, they're like, send this kit to a friend, like share this, because it's like a single-use plastic. So please feel free to share this with others. I actually did that. I sent my sizing kit to a friend who was thinking about getting an Aura ring. And that was like a really fun, like I felt really good about being able to share it, right? So that's one thing where they'd be like, yes, it's a weakness for this product that it's not one size fits all. And you do have to get sizing before you can order it. Here's how we're planning to address that weakness. We'll send you a sizing kit for free. right? So just think about like the clarity and objectivity with which you would develop a strategy for a product, right? You have real depth of understanding of what the strengths are, right? You're not just like, it's pretty and shiny, right? You have like clearly, deeply understood the strengths. And then as you've looked at the weaknesses, you haven't just been saying like, well, it doesn't have a screen, so I better build a screen. Right? You would never be like, let's build a screen on the Oura Ring. You'd be like, no. It doesn't have a screen. That's a feature, not a bug. Here's how we're going to position it so that that becomes a strength, right? Or if you're like, hey, you have to figure out the sizing before you can order it, you're not just jumping to, oh my gosh, we have to build a wristband version. If we don't build a wristband version, we're terrible. Instead, we're like, no, this is part of the strategy is that it's a ring and not a wristband. And so here's how we're going to overcome the sizing issue, right? You build the strategy in a very nuanced way that is deeply rooted in the strengths and then is neutralizing or minimizing the weaknesses, but is not like losing the plot on what the product is and suddenly making it like a screen and a wristband and like, oh, there's a version that gives you like very little data if you're overwhelmed by too much data, right? You're not trying to be everything to everyone. You're like, this is what this is. I'm going to understand its strengths. I'm going to understand its features, and I'm going to build a strategy around it. So if you clear up this misconception, right, of being unaware of your strengths or of discounting your strengths, and instead, if you build a product strategy around yourself and you have a deep, clear awareness of your strengths and you validate them, you recognize them for all the value that they can actually bring, that will get you out of this trap, right? Out of the trap of like, I want to leave because I feel like I'm bad at this, but I have to stay because I feel like I'm bad at this, right? You can step out of that lose-lose situation once you have a really clear, deep understanding of what your strengths are, because then you'll be able to look at the situation you're in and really ask yourself, how does this play to my strengths? Does this job fit with my strengths-based strategy? Does it play to my spikes and my superpowers? And if it doesn't, what am I going to do about it, right? Am I going to adjust the job? Am I find a new job? But at least now I have a strategy that I'm going off of, instead of just feeling like if I'm bad at something, I just in all cases have to stay and keep trying to get better at it. Now, misconception number 3 that keeps people trapped in that lose-lose situation of like, I want to go because I'm bad at it, but I have to stay because I'm bad at it. Misconception number 3 is thinking that deprioritizing your weaknesses and focusing on your strengths makes you a bad person. So many high achievers think that deprioritizing your weaknesses makes you lazy, makes you weak, makes you childish, makes you whiny, makes you defensive, makes you self-indulgent, makes you entitled. You literally imagine like a kid throwing a temper tantrum who's like, I only want to do stuff if I'm already good at it, right? And people will talk as if building your next step around your strengths is like saying, I want to eat cake for breakfast every day. And you need to like wag your finger at your toddler self and be like, no, you need to eat your vegetables and be a real adult, right? There's such a moral undertone to deprioritizing your weaknesses and focusing on your strengths. And I think this is totally the wrong way to think about it at this point in your career, right? Because you are not a kid anymore. You are not in the early stages of your career. You've gone beyond the point where you're just bringing all of your basic skills up to baseline. You have moved into the invest in your strengths, cultivate your spikes phase of your career. And so going back to the product strategy example, right, you would never think that way as you were building the strategy for the Oura Ring. There's no moral undertone as you're developing that product strategy. You would never say, oh, we're lazy for not having a screen on the Oura Ring. We're weak because we don't give people a wristband option alongside the ring option. We're being self-indulgent or entitled by tracking lots of data instead of only having a few data points that you can track, right? You don't add this like moral flavor to the strategic choices you're making. Instead, you're just very neutral, very analytical, and very strategic. You're just like, these are the facts of the product. The product does not have a screen. The product is a ring, not a wristband, and the product tracks many, many, many data points, dozens of data points. Those are the traits. Those are just the facts of how this product works. And now we're going to develop a strategy and a positioning to take advantage of those traits. We're going to target the people who don't want another screen, like on their hands or on their body. We're going to target the people who don't like wristbands. And we're going to position ourselves as the product that gives you lots of data points and why that's such a good thing. And we're also going to give people these aggregate scores to help them make sense of all that data, right? No moral undertone, right? There's no like, this is entitled or this isn't entitled. This is hardworking or this is lazy. This is childish or this is like being an adult. There's no moral undertone at all, right? It's just a factual analysis and a strategy. And that is how I want you to think about it for your career too. Because when you do this, when you get out of thinking about it in terms of this moral undertone, right? Of like, I'm a lazy person, I'm a bad person, if I deprioritize my weaknesses and I'm a good person, I'm a hardworking person, I'm a dedicated person, if I just focus on my weaknesses all the time, right? And this idea of like, I'm self-indulgent and I'm entitled and I'm childish if I want to focus on my strengths, right? And I'm like puritanical and strong if I focus on my weaknesses, right? Let's get all those moral undertones like out of there. I just don't think this has a place in developing your career strategy. Once you just get neutral, analytical, objective, and strategic, then you can get out of this lose-lose, right? Of like, I want to leave my job because I feel like I'm bad at this, but I have to stay in my job because I feel like I'm bad at this. Instead, you can get so neutral and clear about it, right? And just ask yourself, what are my traits? What are my features as a product? What are my strengths? What are my superpowers? And then based on the superpowers, what is my strategy? How do I want to position myself to take advantage of the superpowers I have? And then you can look at your current situation and decide, does this fit with my strengths-based strategy? And if it doesn't, what am I going to do about it, right? But you can just stay clear, calm, and analytical instead of having all these moral undertones to everything, which I just don't think are relevant. It's good to be a moral person, but I just don't think that it's relevant to the problem that you're trying to solve. So if you want to build a strengths-based strategy for your career and use that to get clear on what you want to do next and make it a smashing success, what you really need in order to do this is an objective, expert thought partner. This is very hard, if not impossible, to do by yourself. I would say it's full on impossible to have an objective outside perspective on yourself, right? By definition, you can't be objective and you can't be outside of yourself. And the other thing that's probably happening is you don't have a lot of pattern recognition, right? It's not like you've done this tons and tons of times for tons of different people. You've not spent hundreds and thousands of hours doing this. You probably run into situations like this in your career where you're like, I really think I need to make a change, like half a dozen times throughout your whole career, right? So you don't have the expertise and pattern recognition of someone who does this all day long, right? And this is exactly what I spend all day doing for my clients. I've been doing this for years. I have done this for thousands of hours. I have worked with so many people with so many different strengths, so many different strategies, all different situations. I have so much expertise and pattern recognition around this that I can really just help you accelerate this process and make sure you get to the right answer for you. So if you want to build a strengths-based career strategy, right, for yourself and use it to get clear on what's next and make it a success, come talk to me. Book your free career audit with me in the episode description. I'm going to help you get clear and precise and objective about what your strengths are, right? I have a 3-step process for doing this. I'll walk you through it when we talk. And then I will also help you build your strengths-based strategy for your next career step, right? We'll figure out, how do I bring my strengths to market and angle them against a high value problem that someone's going to pay me a lot of money to solve. And then I'm going to help you execute that strategy. I'm going to help you make a really clear-headed decision about what you're doing next and help you take all the steps that are necessary to make it a huge success. And that way you can get out of this spot that you've been in where you're like, something's not quite right, something is not working, but I don't know what to do about it. We'll get you out of feeling confused, stuck, like you're walking in circles, like something's not quite working. And we're going to get you back to feeling like you're at the top of your game, back in your zone of genius, firing on all cylinders and doing the best damn work of your life and feeling amazing while you do it. That's what I love working on with my clients to help them do. So come talk to me. The link to book a free career audit is in the episode description, and I can't wait to chat with you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Aligned Ambition podcast. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already and share this podcast with anyone you know that you think could use it. If you'd like to explore working together in a one-on-one coaching engagement with me, book a free consult call at poojavcoaching.com/contact. You can grab that link in the episode description. And if you have any questions, thoughts, or topics you want me to cover in this podcast, shoot me an email at pooja@poojavcoaching.com. You can grab that in the episode description too. Talk to you soon.